Hello everybody and welcome back to another chapter of Brightstorm. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapter 29, Goodbye Dad. I hope you enjoy it. Under the shelter of the mountains, they waited until they were certain the Victorious was long gone back through the gap it had made in the mountainside. Then they all rested, every one of them physically and emotionally exhausted to the core. Arthur snuggled into Turk's fur. But we heard you get shot back near the lake on the Victorious. There was silence. I leapt from the ship and was still in the snow a long time. When I heard their thoughts and what they would do to you, I couldn't let the dark take me yet. I made it to the forest and my pack found me and took the bullet from my flesh and healed my wound. Then Startok returned with the others, and we heard the death skyship destroying the mountain to make their path. The hawk Pathentha led the way, and we followed to find you. Thank you, Tuyuk. Exhausted, the four travellers lay in the warm fur of the thought wolves. Parthena was beside Arthur. He stroked her head. So, you flew to find the thought wolves and led them to us. You are a brilliant bird. Dad would be so proud, he whispered. Arthur looked over at Maudie and others, their bodies soon rising and falling with every slow, sleeping breath. As he closed his eyes, Arthur tried to forget Eudora's triumphant earlier. We made it out alive, he reminded himself, and that was no doubt a greater victory. Later, Felicity made sweet tea, which was like nectar, and revived them with every sip, washing the awfulness little by little away from their bodies and minds. Even the thought wolves tried some and agreed there was an almost magical quality to this strange drink from Arthur. It felt good not to be racing anymore, although the stab of failure and losing the evidence was a feeling Arthur knew he would never lose. The truth was now inside him, and it went some way to filling the hole. He felt a great weight had lifted from his shoulders. When they felt ready to embark on the journey back, Arthur and Maudie visited the ice cave where their father lay. The tunnel had partially collapsed due to vibrations from the explosions, but they were as close as they could get. Harriet and Felicity left them there alone for a moment to say goodbye. Whilst then readied themselves for the journey over the mountain. Dad, we didn't understand what you were trying to tell us by sending Parthena with the locket, but we now know, said Arthur. We came for you, and we made it all the way to South Polaris. It wasn't quite as we'd hoped it would be, I'm afraid, Maudie said. There won't be any reward, and we'll have to find a way back, and we'll have to find a way to make our own way back to Lontown. But we know we can do it. Arthur looked sideways at Maudie and smiled. Because we did what we came to do. We found the truth. And we did lots of cool stuff on the way. We crossed the second continent, and we met kings, and we even crossed the biggest ocean on the planet, only to survive. We'll let you guess who was behind that. And we crashed over the everlasting forest, but every crew member lived. We met the thought wolves, and we found out how to be friends with them. They saved us. Parthena was amazing, and all the way, Harry and Felicity, they both fell silent for a moment. They've been beside us every step of the way, Maudie began. I mean, they've really been there for us, like family. The twins looked at each other and smiled. We're going to be fine, Dad, said Maudie, and we're going to make you proud, even if we have no evidence left to prove that Eudora Vane did. We're going to rebuild the Brightstorm name, somehow. They stood up to leave, but as they did, their torch flame light caught a curious shape, too square to be a rock. Arthur went over to it. Maud, it's Dad's camera. Hey, what if it's still working? We could take another picture of Violetta's fuel stores and at least prove Dad didn't steal them from the Victorious. Come on, let's tell Harry. They both paused. Don't want to leave him, Maudie said. Then let's leave something here with him, so we're always here, Arthur said. Maudie took her ribbon from her hair. Then Arthur remembered the page from the volcanic islands of the north. It had been in his arm all this way. He could get another copy back in Lontown. He unfolded the paper and read, "The Brightstorm moth, a new species discovered by Ernst Brightstorm in the Northern Isles, uses the light of the moon to ensure they travel in an absolutely straight line, allowing them to navigate successfully between 2 days." Sorry, you read that sentence again. Allowing them to navigate successfully between 2 volcanic islands 50 miles apart and never stray from their path. Together they tied it round a rock using Maudie's ribbon, their 2 hands working as one. They found the thought wolves with Harriet and Felicity on the mountainside ready to depart. The aurora rippled faintly across the great beautiful plain of South Polaris, dancing in its glorious colours. That's a sight I'll never forget," Felicity said with a sigh. "I could murder that woman for destroying my camera," Harriet huffed. Arthur smiled and held out his father's camera. "We found it in the tunnel, close to him. Is there a chance it will still work?" Harriet examined it. "There's still film in there. It's a bit battered, but it's worth a try. Maudie and I thought we could retake the photographic evidence from the Violetta on the way back to show the fuel supplies were empty." "That's a brilliant idea," Harriet smiled. "But first, I think we should capture this moment." Then she carefully arranged the camera on a rock, and Maudie helped her set an automatic timer. They posed for a picture with the thought wolves, with the Great Plain and southern aurora behind. "Well, there's a picture we may at least be able to make good money with in Lontown, and perhaps we can get a few more of the mountains on the way back to sell to the Geographical Society," said Harriet. It will certainly be a memory picture, that's for sure." Felicity sat on a rock and looked around one last time. "I must say, this is the first time my feet have felt rested in over a moon cycle." They all laughed. "Really?" said Harriet. They nodded and climbed on their thought wolves. Arthur felt comforted. Tuyuk's fur was as soft and warm as Dad's arms around him. After 2 days travelling through the mountainside, they carefully made the treacherous journey back over the frozen lake, then to Violetta, where they retook the pictures of the empty fuel stores, and finally back into the forest. In another 2 days, the small clearing where the Aurora had crashed came into view, but there was no sign of the crew, only a few odd scraps of the ship. Where in all the wide have they vanished to?" Felicity said. "You don't think—" Arthur's heart sank in his chest as he had the awful thought that something terrible had happened to them at Eudora's hands. Harriet looked across at him. "Welby will have put in steps in place to protect everyone, I'm certain." Tuyuk sniffed the air. "To the west. He knows where they've gone," Arthur said. The thought wolves took them a little further west, following the scent trail. After a while, the thought wolves stopped in a small, darkened clearing. There was a rustling of leaves, and figures curiously emerged from behind the trees. "Welby, is that you?" Harriet called. "Don't be afraid of the wolves. They're as friendly as ever, and ever so remarkable." With some trepidation, the crew came forward, but it wasn't long before they embraced their friends warmly. Now, trepidation is one of our key words today. Trepidation. The relief at seeing Harriet was clear on Welby's usually unreadable face. "Your parents would not have forgiven me if you could not come back," he said to her seriously. Harriet gave him a firm pat on the arm. "It would take more than the third continent and that woman to stop us." "A wise decision to move, Welby. Naturally, we suspected she may return at some point, so we created a concealed camp. We heard her pass by not 2 days ago." Queenie purred excitedly to see Harriet and brushed happily around her legs, then went straight to Maudie and with a purr, jumped into her arms. "She's glad we're all right," Maudie said. The crew had made a great canopy above the clearing, disguising the rebuild of the skyship. It looked unrecognisable. The crew had worked very hard under Welby's capable command and had made half of the Aurora into what looked like a workable ship. "We've bypassed the secondary hydro pump and rewired the hydro converter," Welby declared. "That was a genius idea, Welby," Maudie said, impressed. "I'm not your average butler," he said with a wink. "She's half a skyship, but a fair good half, which should get us back to the second continent with a bit more work. I can't quite find the best way to connect the two with a single valve. I've been waiting for you to help me. If you could lend me your expertise, Miss Brightstorm." "I knew you needed us, Welby. We're not just children, eh?" She smiled and got to work. The ship was almost ready. With a few tweaks and by melting enough snow for the engine, they were ready to set sail the next day. It was time to say a sad farewell to the Thorwolves. Arthur squeezed his arm tightly around Tuyuk's neck and found he couldn't speak, so he simply thought, "Friend, friend," said Tuyuk. After a long time holding on, Arthur eventually said, "Maybe one day I'll come back to visit in my own skyship." "You are welcome in our pack any time," said Tuyuk. The Thorwolves dipped their heads, then turned and sped into the trees, disappearing into the gloom. As half the ship Aurora took off, their farewell hounds sounded across the forest. The weather was kind to the crew, and after half a moon cycle, they were back in the second continent. Turma patched up the Aurora, insisting they wouldn't take a sovereign for supplies or labour and filling their ship with wonderful foods. After several more weeks, they reached the Coldam Sea and were soon flying over the first continent green fields. It was mid-morning break. Harriet steadied the wheel while everyone else lounged on the deck eating spiced egg-free buns, which Felicity had named home buns to celebrate their return. Arthur leant over the side of the ship, viewing the farms below through the uniscope. Farmers sowing seeds and cows lazing in the fields. It's funny. It's as though nothing has changed down there, yet everything has changed up here. "I know what you mean," said Maudie, although he wasn't entirely sure he did. He could see the Maudie-shaped hole there in Lontown waiting to be filled in the future at Lontown University. But for him, it felt like the end, not the start. "Are you all right?" Maudie said. He nodded. "Never better." Maudie put her arms around him and hugged him tight. He wrapped his arm as far around her as he could. "You have more hug in one arm than Eudora has in her little finger," Maudie said. "But I still can't believe we're half Vane." Arthur stuck out his tongue and pulled a face. "Yes, I vote we don't mention it again. I don't think Auntie Eudora has the best ring to it." They laughed. Felicity came over, taking a couple of marsh cakes from her pocket, and passed them one each. Harriet handed over the watch of the wheel to Welby and joined them. "So, you never did tell me how your need for a remarkable iron arm came about in the first place. The truth is, even though Maudie's stories are far more exciting, I was just born like this." Harriet smiled. "You know, you've got a real talent for problem solving and seeking out the truth, and they're important life skills for an explorer." It felt good to hear her say that. I thought we'd lost our future when we lost Dad, because we were going to do these things together, the three of us, as a family. Control is an illusion. We never know what life will throw at us. You are the master of your destiny, Arthur, and you can still do those things. Your father is still with you inside. Harriet smiled and lingered as though she was contemplating something. "I wanted to ask you both a question," she said eventually. They looked at her curiously. "I know I failed us all by not winning the sovereigns, but I have some savings which will be paid to the crew and yourselves. It's not a patch on what we could have had, but it will compensate everyone fairly for what they have put in. And I wondered, that is, if you would come and live at number 4 Archangel Street when we get back. The house will only be half the size it used to be, at least for a while, mind you. But there will be no need for you to go back to that vile place in the slumps. And if the Beggings has anything to say about it, I'll soon set them right. Felicity has agreed to stay on as a cook. Welby can be a bit grumpy, but he's all right, really. And I can't promise I'm the easiest to live with on account that I can't still sit still for more than a few minutes. But yes, they both jumped in. We'd like that more than anything. What a lovely chapter to end on. So we have 2 more chapters of the book and I can't wait to read them when we get back from our half-term break. I hope you enjoyed that chapter and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.